So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I am Bhavesh from the SwiftEnterprise product management team, and today I'll be taking you through all the updates that were part of our major 6.0 release. Before we begin, we would like to assure you that the webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with all those who had registered for the session. We will also be uploading it on our YouTube channel soon, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and also press the bell icon so that you get an update whenever we upload this session. Also, we would like to hear from you. So if you have any questions or feedback for anything that we will be covering today, please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will take those up towards the end of the session. So without further ado, let's get started. We'll first look at the AI-powered capabilities that we have launched in this version. So we'll look at how work item creation has become much more easier with the help of AI. And also we will look at all the enhancements that we have done for our AI-powered Swiftbot. We'll then look at the updates that we have done on the Agile front. So you will get to see our new story mapping module that we have brought in for our Agile projects that will help you visualize your roadmap and build it as per the persona's perspective. As well as we have brought in the execution board on mobile apps, so you are able to track your development progress on the go. Apart from these major updates, we have done a whole lot of usability enhancements in the area of dashboard, ECI segments, ECI tables to be more precise, and also the work item details and listing view. So we'll be looking at all those in our session today. So first up, let's look at what we have in store for the AI-assisted work item creation. So before I dive into how this has been done, let me just set up the context of what is the problem that we are trying to solve here. So typically you would have a work item configured with various fields, and these fields are required to have certain information from compliance point of view, from data analysis point of view, and several other factors that are important. But when it comes to creating that work item, all these become a hurdle or become a cumbersome activity for the end user. So we understand the necessity for having all that data points on a work item, but we also saw scope for reducing that additional entry that a typical end user has to perform, even though most of it may seem redundant or repetitive in some form or the other. So that's where we thought we can harness the power of artificial intelligence and make sure that it is helping you create work items very quickly. So for that, what we have done is look at a very generic example of a tickety form. So herein, I've gone to my typical ITS support project wherein all our team members log in requests with our IT team to help things get done from them. So typically, it requires just a name and description to help them understand what exactly needs to be done. But if you move forward, you will see that you have other fields like priority, the location, category, customer type, customer name, and so on and so forth. And in fact, some of these fields are mandatory as well. So typically, I would put in a request wherein I say I would like to upgrade my SwiftEnterprise setup to the latest build. And what I can also do is provide the same description. So this ideally serves the purpose more than enough to the IT team member to understand what needs to be done. And a simple one-liner is what I generally give every time I need this upgrade to be done. Now, since I'm co-located and they know this is a request coming from me, so they would know the priority, the location as well. But still, this information is required on the e-form which is being captured here. So what we have done is, as soon as I have typed in the name, I have provided the description, which will mostly contain most of the information that one would require to understand what could be the other field values. Once I tap out of this, a couple of things are going to happen. So first one is it will automatically populate the fields based on the previous tickets which I have logged in, and also it will show me similar tickets which have been logged in the system. So let me just tap out of the description field, and you will see that the priority, the location, and the category has been populated here automatically along with the customer name. So these are the fields which got automatically populated. I didn't have to do anything. It has saved me a whole lot of time without having to go ahead and click on each of the data points, each of the fields, and select the respective value. At the same time, what you will see on the right hand side of the screen is a bulb icon which has come up, which is going to show me similar work items which the system has found. So as I said, this is a typical request. I log in probably every 2 weeks or so when I need to upgrade my setup to the latest build. These are the tickets which I had logged, and it had similar name and description as well. So depending upon the similarity match, these items are shown to me, and I can also click on them and view the details of the item. So while this is a very simple case which I've taken for a ticket e-form to demonstrate, but enable this feature for any of your other transactional e-forms, let's say a defect e-form for example. So a defect e-form will generally have your name and the description which will have the steps to reproduce, and a whole lot of other fields that need to be filled. So in that case, this is going to be very helpful, because if there is a defect already in the system which is having a matching description, I can very well open it. I can look at the details of that defect. At the same time, if it is something which is already resolved, I will be able to look at it even further and maybe even decide not to log this defect, probably because it's a duplicate one. So all those factors get considered every time I'm going to log that work item where this feature is enabled. So that's going to fasten the process of logging work items, irrespective of the amount of data that needs to be entered. As I said, these are automatically pre-filled, but if you choose to differ with any of the recommendation which AI has done for this work item, I can still go ahead and change the value here. So that's also possible. So most of the hard work gets done, and you simply need to tweak it further based on what will be different in that scenario. So that's how work item creation has become easy. So just to highlight again, what we saw is you are able to create the work item, and this recommendation of automatic field population of field values as well as recommendation of similar items happens at the time of work item creation. As soon as the work item creation is done, you will continue to work on it just like any other typical work item. So this is going to help you create work items faster, as well as if you need a reference to any similar work items, you will have that alongside on that screen, so that you can refer to it and provide the details in a much more effective manner. Now, while there is a configuration also which is being associated to this, so you will have to enable this settings for the respective work item types where you would like this kind of a behavior to happen, as well as it would require selection of one description field or a multi-line text or a rich text field based on which the recommendations should happen for the field values and similar work items. So you will have to go about setting this up as part of the eForm configuration, just like any other eForm settings that you have right now. Also, just to add, this is currently in beta and it is available as an add-on module, so you can get in touch with your respective support POC so that you are able to turn it on and try out this feature on your setups. So moving ahead with the new intents and the trainer we have for the Swiftbot. Now, let me switch to the application again. So what you would see here now is we had implemented certain standard actions that can be performed via the Swiftbot. So for example, you can route a defect, you can reject a defect, you can block a work item, and things like that. So there are a whole lot of use cases that can be served by the Swiftbot. So what we thought is have a detailed welcome message that will help the end user understand what all it can do for you. So first up, it will show you that which are the critical items which are pending in his inbox. So at the moment, there are a couple of items, action item and a defect. And of course, I can click on them and it will open up the work item details view for it. At the same time, it will show if there are any work items which are due in this week. So again, I get to see the work items right here itself. And if in case there have been any comments on the work items I have worked upon and may not be even in my inbox right now, I get to see the work items on which I have the comments as well. So all this information is available to me upfront, and at the same time, there are certain recommendations on what all you can do with the help of the Swiftbot. So apart from the standard interactions, like I said, the ability to route, reject a work item, or get information about the work items in your inbox, now we have started supporting the ability to navigate to a certain menu without having to go through all that manually. So for example, I can say here, go to time tracking, and it will quickly share a link with me. And the moment I click on time tracking here, without me having to navigate from the home workspace on the top and then my work, timesheet, time tracking, all that navigation, it has directly taken me to the time tracking view here. Similarly, let's say I'm inside a project. So let me just say that go to dashboard. And again, it will return me with a link which will directly navigate me to the dashboard. So this kind of navigation, whether it's within the context of the project or outside the context of the project, as long as you are going to have access to that menu, it will take you to that project and the menu as well. So that's how simple it is now to navigate from one menu to another. Also, another thing that we felt that could serve potential of having a conversational UI for the Swiftbot is wherein you can ask questions regarding a feature, how it works. So for example, I can ask, how do I see the commit history in Pivot Analytics? So despite me goofing up with spelling here, it has shown me results wherein it is pointing me to the Pivot Analytics help page where I can say that how working with the Git integration in place, how I can view the commit history in Pivot Analytics. So the number of lines of codes which have changed, added, deleted, all that is possible as part of my Pivot Analytics. And I was able to get that in a jiffy without having to go through the online help search. So I can ask questions like this. For example, again, can ask a very generic question saying, how does the burn down chart work? And again, it will point me to the page which explains how the burn down chart works in general, how I can go about configuring it, and so on and so forth. So these are the two new ways in which the Swiftbot is now going to assist you. As I said, this is the navigation as well as the help bot. So all this was possible because we have a bot trainer in place as well. So this is where the actual magic happens, wherein I go about setting up with the preferences on what should be the URL, where it is going to interact with the NLU server, the responses it's going to get, whether it should be turned on. Maybe if you are just wanting to give it a try, you can enable it for specific login IDs and eventually for all the users. There are default set of intents that we are shipping with the product. So a whole lot of intents are there across various types. So you have a fallback action, item list, a goodbye, and prioritize inbox data, and so on and so forth. So a whole lot of intents are already being provided with sample user text so that they don't have to start right from the scratch when it comes to deploying this bot. But of course, you have a customized solution. We understand that. So for those purposes, you also have a trainer in place. So wherein you can simply click on the add button here, you can select one of the intents here, and you can say that anything needs my attention for the prioritized inbox data. Now the prioritized inbox data helps me return with any items which are due in the current week or have a priority with critical. So I can train it to respond it in that manner even when people are going to type in something like this. So I can go about training the bot, and as we saw, it is also trained on our help content. So if you have customized solution, there's a good chance that you also have a customized help content as well. So you can very well upload your help folder which has all the HTML files. You can specify the path here, and you can also specify the folder path which needs to be excluded, which may have images, GIFs, or videos. So you can exclude that path that doesn't get taken up as part of our analysis. So the moment you upload this information and say generate training data here, what it's going to do is it's going to send all that files to the Solar engine, which is where all the parsing will happen, all the intent mapping will happen based on all the H1 tags or the H2 tags that you may have in your help files. And those then will again come back to our server, which will help us know in what scenarios what should be the response or the help pages that should be shown the end user. So that's how you can do it. And as I said, since you were able to create custom training examples, you can also try it out. We had tried earlier here is anything urgent, and that's something which I tried as a custom text, and it is mapped to my prioritized inbox. And if I say what are my critical items, returning me the intent, which is the inbox filter, since it automatically understands my corresponds to the inbox. And when I say are there any critical, it is going to map it to the priority critical, severity critical, and things like that. So you also get the entity breakup when you are mapping it against any of these intents. So that's how you can go about using the bot as well as training it further based on your customized solution. So just to quickly recap, you now have a detailed welcome message which helps you understand the different ways in which it can assist you. It can help you navigate or jump to a specific page to which you have access. And if you are in doubt, you can certainly ask the Swiftbot to point you to the relevant help pages, be it custom or production. Now, along with this, we looked at the bot trainer, and we saw how you can go about creating custom training data. You can map it to your custom help files, and also verify all the custom training data that you may have entered and see if it is getting mapped to the required intent and the entities breakup is happening as required. So all this is currently in beta. We would certainly be working towards adding more and more intents, and if you would like to enable this, please contact your support team, as this is an add-on module and we can go ahead and assist you on how it needs to be done. So moving on to the story mapping for Agile projects. So before I dive into how the story mapping board helps you in your Agile projects, let me just try and set the context of what the story mapping board is in general. So Agile teams in general are strongly dependent on input of small, independent, and testable stories. So if you don't have testable stories, then you can't make fast releases. And if they are not independent, then again you will get stuck, as you will need a whole set of dependent stories to come together in order to work and make a test together and finally release them. So bringing all things together becomes difficult if you don't have small, independent, and testable stories. And this is a kind of problem which generally people run into when they have large chunk of requirements. And the challenge is again to break it down into small, independent, and testable stories. So the traditional way is that you go ahead, break down the requirement into tasks. Tasks would typically be UI development, API development, server-side development, and so on and so forth. So all these tasks get distributed across the team members, and each one works on it independently. Then you again try to bring all that work together, do some system testing, and see if it's working or not. And obviously, as a result of this, you don't have an independently deployable piece of work, because nothing is one complete piece of functionality due to the nature of how the breakdown has happened. So that's where story mapping is going to help you. It will avoid this problem, because it is a very unique way to define a large requirement into small, independent, testable stories. which most teams who come from the requirement documentation, SRS, BRD culture, they require some time to transition to this kind of working. And instead of trying to traditionally break it down into dependent tasks, which is not going to work as per the agile execution model, story mapping then becomes very useful in that case. So if you're following the story mapping approach, there are three things which you are definitely going to benefit with. You will get small independent testable stories. You will get some sort of a relative sizing also on the stories, and you can also start building a release plan saying this is the first thing I need to have, and then subsequent stories that need to be delivered eventually. So these are the three things that get done when you are going through the story mapping process. Out of these three things, the second piece of relative sizing is not within our tool right now, as there are various ways in which it can be done offline, online as well. But the first one and the third point, as I said, of small independent testable stories and building a release plan, that is definitely going to help you. Now, this concept comes from Jeff Patton, who is the founder of StoryMap. And if you go look at his literature, he refers to tasks. However, by task, he means the ability to do something on the end user side. And it's not the development task that we generally refer to in our applications or many other applications as well. So there might be some difference between the terminologies being used by Jeff Patton's literature and how we have implemented it. But the overall essence of story mapping board is to have a visual map and make sure the user persona is kept in mind and the development happens in the usage sequence. So that's how it will help you. So just to help you understand the structure of the story map, the first level is going to help you define the usage flow of the product, wherein you define the step 1, step 2, step 3, all the activities in the sequence of how a typical user would go about using the product. The next level is where you define the personas based on which you are going to have smaller groups of work, or epics as we may call it in our application. And then you go ahead and break it down into small independent stories. This, of course, initially are going to be not planned for any release or sprint, but of course, as part of this visualization as well, we have ensured that you can go ahead and plan it against a release and sprint. So let me now switch to the application and show you how it really happens. So I've gone to one of my Agile projects, and this is the new menu called Story Mapping. So as I said earlier, you would have 4 levels. The first one being themes, which I've mapped to currently. You can then have epics, and then you can have user stories defined for each of those personas. Now, before we dive into the structure again, let me just tell you that this is something which is highly configurable in nature, because you would have different ways in which you're referring to your work items here. So someone would not be using theme at the first level. They could very well use epics. We understand that. So you can make a selection of epic here. You can make a selection of feature. If you have configured something called as feature, you can make a selection of feature here. So all those custom item types, or if you have gone ahead and made changes to the name, all those will also reflect here. So you have the complete flexibility to select the relevant item type which needs to be available for each of these levels. Once you have done that, the next step is obviously to define the persona. Since the essence of having all the user story is to build as per the user's point of view, so persona becomes all the more important. So you could have multiple personas defined here based on which the user stories need to be developed. And finally, on the roadmap planning point of view, you can select whether you would like to plan in terms of releases or in terms of sprint, or you could have a combination of both, which is the recommended one, because we have built it in such a manner wherein sprints are going to be part of your releases, which is the end deliverable. So all these options are possible for you before you can go ahead and start creating the work items here. Now, one important thing to keep note of is that since the intent here is to go ahead and build the story map, all the items need to be created in the story map. This is not going to import, this is not going to pick up items which are already present in your agile project. You may have themes, epics, and user stories already, but since you are starting by building a story map here, all those items need to be built here itself. So for each of those levels, so for example, you can go ahead and add a card. So you can add a user story and theme and epic. While you can go ahead and add them here, they will start reflecting immediately inside your listings and other areas of the application, just like any other regular work item. So what I've done in this case is I've taken an example of an e-commerce website where the typical user journey of a buyer would be to find a product, examine it, add to the basket, probably sign up for an account, and make the order and payment for it. So that would be the sequence of events that a buyer would go through. And again, from the point of view of a buyer, you would break it down into smaller chunks, which would be the epics in this case. So I've created epics saying if I'm going to find a product, you can go ahead and browse using categories, you can browse using basic search, or items could get recommended as well. So all those are the epics, and eventually you can go ahead and add user stories. Now, creation of themes, epics, or user stories need not happen only from here. You can quickly right click on the column here itself, and the user story would get created instantly. Now, just like you are seeing here, all those user stories I have already created. And if you can notice, it also has a WPS code attached to it. So we understand that a single theme may have multiple epics, and each of those epics would have different user stories associated to it. So that's why you can keep a check on whether this user story belongs to which epics and themes by looking at the WBS code here itself. So I'm looking at 2.3.1 here. So I know it belongs to my second theme of examining a product and that of comparing the product in the epic. So that's how my user stories are aligned. And eventually, once I have created all the user stories for the respective persona and the epic, I can start dragging and dropping them against a release and sprint. Now, release and sprints are something don't have to be created here. It is going to refer to the release and sprints which are already created as part of the project. However, what we have also done as an improvement is that it will only refer or show the releases and sprints which are currently open, so that you are going to plan for them from a future point of view. So you need not look at the older versions or the closed versions of the releases and sprints. So only the open release and sprints are shown here, and you can go ahead and start assigning the user stories to the releases and sprints. So each of these row and columns are referring to the theme to which the user story belong and the epics to which the user stories belong. So based on that, you are able to do a quick planning of how you should go about building up your product. So if I scroll ahead up further, in some sense, I can make a call or a judgment saying that this is how I should be able to build the release plans, because on the very left side of the story map, I would have the initial use cases, and the rest of them are going to be dependent on it. So first, I need to start building and take up as many user stories which are pending on the left hand side, and then once I have the minimum amount of functionality present to make the next step of functionalities work, I should move ahead on the right hand side of the sequence. So that is the visual story mapping board for you. So just to quickly recap, you are now able to visualize your roadmap and communicate that end-to-end user journey visually by just having the high level goals and then break it down to the end deliverables. Also, you are able to build the plan from a persona's perspective. As I said, this is extremely important when it comes to being agile, when the user stories are written from the end user's point of view. So if you have the persona in front of you, you are going to be able to create the user stories accordingly. Also, this is something which is currently in beta and available as an add-on module. So if you would like to try it out, you can contact our support team or SPOC, and we can go ahead and help you enable this. So moving on to the execution board on mobile app. So as we saw with the story map, it was important to build user stories from the user persona's point of view and from the usage sequence. While we are helping you build the plan, it's also important to keep track of your work while you're on the go. So one of the things we have done as part of this release is now for all your agile projects, you are able to view the execution board also on the mobile app. So let me just quickly transition to our mobile app. Now on the left hand side, with all the other modules, you will now see your option for the execution board. The moment I tap on it, the execution board for my agile projects. But since this is the first time which I'm trying to use the execution board, it will show me little guidance on how I can go about moving the cards. So you can do a long press and then go ahead and drag and drop it to another column. So just like the execution board on the web, you will be able to see all the column hierarchy which you have defined for the swim lanes. So I'm getting to see all those columns along with the cards in it. And what the names would refer to is the parent column and the child column. So in this case, validate is the parent column and it has two child columns, one being manual and the other one automated. So all that bifurcation which you can see on the web version is also available on the mobile app. And dragging and dropping the work item is also easy. As it showed earlier, you simply need to do a long press and then drag and drop it wherever you would like it to be placed. It will also get highlighted temporarily just to highlight this is the card which was recently updated. So all that is possible, and if you tap on it, it will also show you the details of the work item just like it is there on the work item view of the home page. So other actions which you can perform here is you can flag just like you would do on the web world. You can also move the card. So if you are not fond of doing the drag and drop across several columns, if that's the need, you can use the move card option and you can make a selection of the column to which the card needs to be moved, and it will automatically move the card. And finally, you can also look at all the swim lanes which are there for this project. So these are the cards in my bugs lane. And if I would like to switch to another project, you simply have to tap on the briefcase icon on the top, and you will be able to go again to the execution board of that agile project. So just to quickly recap, what we saw is now you can access the execution board on your mobile app. You can do a quick drag and drop, select the relevant project to which you want to refer, and also do the standard actions of block, moving the cards, flagging it, and completing the card as well. So all those options are also possible via the mobile app execution board. Now moving on to the usability enhancements. The first up, we'll look at the dashboard. Again, let me just switch back to the application here. So while you can do a lot of pivoting inside a dashboard, you can quickly lose focus of how you drill down to a certain data point. So for example, this is a widget where I'm looking at all the defects which have been detected across various stages. And as I drill down, let's say out of these 9 defects which have been found in the first requirements review stage, it becomes more and more difficult to remember from what data point I have reached to this drill down level. So give you the full context of how you have reached a certain data point, we have started showing you the drill down path right on top of the dashboard widget. So I've come down from 9 defects which were tagged to the requirement review. Out of them, 3 are critical. Out of them, 2 are internal review defects. One was misinterpretation, and the second was inconsistent module interface. And finally, I can drill down on this one to look at the actual defect as well. So while I'm looking at this data, I get to have the context also seen on top. So I know how I've reached here, how I've reached that two internal review defects, which are out of the three critical ones, and 9 requirement review defects. So this kind of information, wherever you have a drill down configured on your dashboard, you are going to see this available, whether it's an item status component like it is in this case, or a metric widget component, or even for your custom ECR widgets. For all those scenarios, based on the data point which was upon, you will continue to see the drill down path on the top. And this is not only for the charts, but also for your tables. So even in those cases, you will continue to see the data points being populated on the top. So along with these, we have made changes for the ECR dashboard widgets particularly. So some of the features which were not there for the ECR dashboard widgets, they have been introduced. Ability to change the axis labels, ability to invert the axis on the fly. There's a new literal which will help you show the goal values, just like any metric widget components. You will also now be able to plot the goal values for your ECR based dashboard widgets. And while you are going to publish ECR table as a dashboard widget, you also now can specify a help file path. So if you have configured separate help pages for your custom metric widget components, you will now be able to point it to a specific help file as well, just like any other widget which is there shipped out of the box. So now it's much more consistent with the standard product shipped widgets, and you will get the same kind of usability across. Now moving on to the improved usability that we have done for the ECR tables. So generally what happens is you have a whole lot of information configured for your eForms. It could be even a typical field segment. So if you would like to make them at one go, you can make use of the full screen option, which is now available on the top right corner. Also, if you would like to have continuous access to any of the actions which are there on top for the ECR tables, we have ensured that they are going to be available on the top right corner always. So irrespective of how wide the table is, they will continue to show on top, unlike earlier where they will only show on the top right corner of the table. So if you have a wide table like we are seeing here, it continues to stay on the top, and you can perform the actions much more easily now. Also, we have given the option for you to hide, unhide certain columns. So if there are any mandatory columns, in this case, as you can see, the role is a mandatory column, so you wouldn't be able to hide them. But if you would like to hide certain columns from them, you can decide to do that. So for example, I can say I want to look at the remarks column, I don't want to look at the depart RM email ID. All that information or that column will no longer be visible. So this is something which will definitely help you look at the relevant data, and this will also be remembered when you are logging across different work items as well. So if you come back to this work item, the selection will be persisted. In fact, if you do an export of this table, you will also continue to get the same information even in the export as well. Apart from that, the full screen option is going to be available for the tables as well. So if you have multiple tables configured and you just want to focus on one of them, you can make use of the full screen option. Along with this, you can configure to navigate to a different segment. So in this case, I've configured so that it can go to the next segment once I've done looking at this one. So when I say navigate to defect analytics, it is another segment as part of the same eForm instance, defect analytics, and it has quickly transitioned to this one. And again, here I can look at all the information which I have here. I have the option to do a full screen, look at the relevant columns here, decide which columns I do not wish to see here. And you also now have an option to navigate to another menu. So let's say you look on this defect analytics page and you want to look at all the defects which are part of this project. You can still do that. You can click on it and it will go to the menu there. So just to quickly recap, we saw this irrespective of the amount of data you may have on your ECR segments, the full screen option and the show hide columns option is going to help you see the relevant data and also remember it whenever you are doing other operations. You also now have the option to build links to another segment or to another menu inside the project altogether. So you can use it for transitioning seamlessly as per the functional flow need. And finally, we have supported the email field type as part of the ECI tables. Moving on to, so we looked at the full screen option that was made available in the details view, but we also have enhanced the listing view. So now the listing view will by default have the ID column locked in. So irrespective of the horizontal scroll, they will continue to be locked, and you can also decide to select the columns that need to be locked. So in this case, you simply have to click on the down arrow and say lock, and it will lock the first 4 columns automatically, and you will not lose focus of these columns. Now this again is going to be remembered against the table view. So if I have multiple table views configured here, the locking of the columns will be maintained against the respective table view. So that also we have ensured is taken care of, so that you can have different table views as well as different columns being locked for each of those respective table views. So those were the changes which we have done for the details view of the work item as well as the listing. Along with these, we have done some enhancements which will help you know how many characters are remaining when you are entering data in your multi-line text fields and comments. It will be seen at the bottom of the field. And we have also introduced a new REST API that will help you remove one or more user calendar exceptions. So that's all we had for the session today. We'll now take questions you may have any of the features that we demonstrated today. So I see one question which says that how do I use the backlog refinement board as well as the story map board? That's a great question, because we understand, I mean, so story map generates the inventory of stories, as well as the backlog refinement or the product backlog also generates inventory of stories. So we understand that that could cause confusion, but what we need to see here is there is a very important difference between the outcome of a product backlog compared to that of a story map. So for story map, there is a logical sequence of work that a story map has inherently, because we have laid up all our actions, the sequence in which the actions need to be performed from the persona's point of view, and then laid down the actual user stories. So there is an inherent sequence present in the user stories which are going to come out of a story map, whereas a backlog could may or may not have that sequence. In fact, in most cases it wouldn't, because story mapping help you do is ensure that the user stories are going to be taken up in a sequence in which the user stories are going to be utilized by the end user as well. Beyond that, when you're building the release plan also, so since story map is the visualization, you can easily say that you need to finish the stories on the left of the usage sequence first, and then go ahead with the stories which are on the right hand side. So that again is a helpful indication, visual indication, whenever you are going to plan for your future releases. And of course, there are multiple ways of building your product backlog. So by the nature of work, maybe if the team is taking small deliverables, defects, etc., then they definitely don't need the story map in those cases, or small enhancements in general. But if you are doing a fresh development, greenfield development, then that's definitely where you will benefit from using a story map, because it will help you break up all those large epic into stories, sequence them, and deliver them in the expected usage. So that's one major benefit or scenario when you can use the story map compared to our traditional backlog refinement board. So I see one question related to AI. Does it auto-populate all the fields across segments? So yes. So again, that's a great question. It does auto-populate all the fields, and I think I know where this is leading to. So this is the first version, I would say, of us trying to harness the power of AI and make things easier for work item creation. Definitely, there is more that we are going to build on these lines. One of them is going to be, let's say that there are certain fields that you wouldn't like to auto-populate at the time of creating a work item. So that kind of flexibility is also required. We understand that it's a valid scenario. So we will be working towards ensuring that there is some setting available wherein you can choose which are the fields that do not need to be auto-populated if you have this auto-population enabled. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's there. It's part of a roadmap, and we will be taking that up in our future releases. Yes, so similarity feature as well as the auto population feature are independent of each other. You can decide to have only the auto population work and not have the similar work item shown, or vice versa. And that can be done via the settings on the eForm configuration. Yes, so another question is, there are add-on modules, and the way these functionalities work, they will require a different deployment, a different setup procedure. So, of course, to enable it, first you would need to contact our support team first, but there is a separate set of activities that need to be performed to enable story mapping, the AI use cases, as well as the bot. Okay, so looks like we don't have any new questions coming in. So if you still, in case, have any questions, feel free to drop in us a mail and we'll get back to you. And if you have any feedback for any of the features that we demonstrated today, do let us know. We'll be more than happy to consider it for our future releases. All right, so that's all we had for the session today. Thanks a lot for joining. Have a great day.